Hi, welcome to the August edition of Tea and Tarot. We today are going to go through how to lay out a person's astrological chart and then on top of it do the horoscope spread, which essentially gives you messages about the planets in each of the houses of the person's natal chart. And it's really nice because it gives a supplement for the houses that might not have any planets in them in a person's natal chart. So go ahead and, you can have your cards, and I'd like to start by today going through the houses, what they mean, and then we're going to actually look at someone's chart and do this reading. So the thing that's really nice and simple about this one is that once you, let me share my screen. Once you have the general idea of what the houses mean in the astrology chart, it's exactly the same to see what they mean in the horoscope spread. So when you read someone's astrology chart, you're looking at a circle, a wheel like this one that's been divided into 12 different houses. And this guide conveniently shows us, and this is from the modernastrologer.com. This little guide conveniently shows us which each house is. So no matter what the person's different horoscope charts might look like, the first house is always basically the segment between the 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock on the clock face of the chart. And that's how you know where to start. You're always going to start in this spot just below the horizon line of the chart with the first house. And then you'll see when you calculate your chart that if you just look, it shows up like this 12-part wheel, and it goes in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So let's look at these different houses and these really great quick keywords that describe what each of them does. So our first house is going to be our house of our first impressions, how we interact with the world, how we come across to the world, what kind of appearance. It can be our physicality. It can be kind of all about our overall zeitgeist in how we approach life is what's in the first house. And, the planetary placements that end up in that first house and the signs that they represent, even though, the houses will always be the same, but on every different chart, you're going to see that the outer ring of the zodiac signs move according to the person's time and day of birth. You'll always be able to find in that first house, whether they have planets in there or not, that's where the card is going to be. That's about how the person appears to the world in general. The second house is about money, wealth, worth, values, the items you own, your work ethics, all of the things associated with your immediate concerns around money. It's not necessarily about exactly like your long-term aspirations, your goals, or your dreams. It's more just about your relationship with the fundamental building blocks of security and how you value yourself within that framework. Your third house, so we've got, basically like the 6 to 7 position in the clock, is how you communicate, the people that you have relationships with that are of a familial nature, but they're your peers, not like your parents or the ancestors. It's more like your peers. It's also related to like all kinds of things like hobbies, electronics. This is sort of might look like a catch-all category. And in a way it is, you might think about like the third house as representing some of the types of things that Mercury or Hermes would rule over: communication, electronics, amusements, things that we do. And the people in our peer group who we pass our time with. So I often look at this third placement as also being like areas where we might be ripe for growth or opportunity to learn something new. It's kind of, for me, the third house is the space of curiosity and how we go about gaining information. And if you think about it that way, then these things make sense. We gain information and learning in our lives from communicating with others, from watching our peers, from going places and having experiences, from reading and research, and from actually trying new things. So I tend to think of that third house keyword as learning. What are we here to learn, and how are we learning it? In the fourth house, we have all the values related to home. So this would be like that direct, like 6 p.m. spot in your reading. It's going to be like, now here we have more like your wider family and your position in it, as opposed to just with your peers in your family. We have traditions, sort of things that we might associate with a Hierophant kind of a card. We have our kind of private world. It says here inner emotions, but I would say it's our private world, how we perform self-care, what we do for ourselves to calm and soothe ourselves in times of difficulty. Also, the areas of life where we may come up against, disturbances or disruptions to our overall sense of safety, peace, and calm. So that fourth house is like our intimate inner sphere. The fifth house, which is like right at about that 5 o'clock spot on the clock dial, is romance, dating, relationships. I usually put here like marriage, long-term relationships, dating, partnership, soulmate. It says here creation of children, although I tend to associate creation of children more with the 8th house, fertility and sex, but it can be like showing you, for example, somebody that, would nurture a project with you just as much as it's showing you in that 5th house, somebody who would nurture a child with you. I see the children as more specific to other spots, but in this kind of brief explanation, it's, that 5th house is the one or the ones who help you discover what love really is. In the 6th house, which is at the like 4 o'clock position on the clock face, you have, this is what I consider to be like our career card, short-term aspirations, who we want to be in terms of our achievements and accomplishments. And those can be of a financial nature. They can be related to reputation or related to work. They can be related to different aspects of our health and wellness, and any communities to which we might belong, where there's a mission to accomplish something together. So it's not necessarily like your neighbors, but if you and your neighbors are in a neighborhood association, then that neighborhood association belongs in that 6th house. The things that govern what you do and kind of where you place your focus on a regular basis. So the 7th house, which is, at that like 2 to 3 o'clock position in your reading, it'll be the 3 o'clock position when you lay cards down. This is relationships of all sorts. This isn't necessarily always related to romantic relationships, though it can describe a marriage partnership, but I see it more as your friendships, the people who are kind of moving in and out of your life, people that you might work on projects with, people that you might have shared activities, relationships that are going to be beneficial. It might be like student-teacher relationships, or it could be peer growth-oriented relationships. But in your 7th house, these are the people that help you to grow. So whereas up here in that 3rd house, we had more like peer-to-peer communication. We still have some of that in the 7th house, but the 7th house tends to be more focused on, we have a mission to accomplish with someone. And then in that 6th house, it's more who we are within an organizational structure. Now in the 8th house is at that like 1 to 2 o'clock spot in your reading. It's going to be all about, they often say that the 8th house is about sex, death, and other people's money. And so I usually put ancestral relationships in here to some degree. I also put sexual relationships and sexual intimacy. And this card, whatever comes, in that 8th house area, is going to really help to describe what was happening in that 5th house. So I might, for example, sometimes see that somebody astrologically has like an earth sign in the 5th house, and then they've, something really earthy and grounded, in their 5th house. Maybe they've got like a, I don't know, let's see, like a Venus in Taurus. So Venus is really happy in Taurus. It's really content. In that 5th house, it's going to mean that your home and your partnership are going to be really comfortable, that you and your partner probably experience acts of service as part of your love language. But then you might find that in the 8th house, there's no planets, and there's a card that comes up there that's like, indicating something like the Chariot, or the Knight of Pentacles. And in that, it's like, oh, for the, the trade-off for all that good comfort and sensuality and sensual safety and security in the relationship might be that the sex life isn't as spicy as the person wishes that it was. And so sometimes you might find that you have that like really grounded, great energy in that 5th house. And then there's some really kind of destructive card, like a devil up in the 8th house, or there might be something that's kind of, a little hectic up there in the 8th house. And that can indicate that a person genuinely wants like, a really deep, fulfilling, nurturing relationship, but that they keep making bad sexual choices to go with somebody who provides the exact opposite of that. So that's just like one example of something I've frequently seen over the past 20 years in interaction between the 5th and 8th houses, if we're doing a natal chart overlaid with a tarot reading. So we're going to look at more examples like that as we go along, but I just wanted to kind of point out the relationships so you can start to see it. So that 8th house is also like, can be business partnerships, can be, money that comes down through your family. It can also be about the person's personal magic, their lungta, their wangtang, their wind horse, their charisma, their life force, and the personal magic that they bring to the world. So lots of things fit in that 8th house category, but depending on what planets are in there and what card you pull on there, it will further elucidate that. But I call the 8th house the house of mysteries. We don't always know where sex is going to lead. We don't always know where a relationship of a financial nature is going to go. We don't always know if the magic that we're trying to do is going to work. We don't always know that, something that we've planned with another person is going to come to fruition. So that last word to describe the 8th house, mystery, is, I think, a really good key term. So your 9th house, which is your 12 to 1 o'clock placement on the clock face in your spread, is big picture. Now, I often contrast that 9th house with the third house. So where the third house is like our casual sphere of learning, Google it, talk to a friend, read a magazine, just go try it. That ninth house is more like, who do I want to be in the world? So it's going to be less about like the shorter term, learning, and more about the longer term, big arc lessons of life. And I usually put those two together, that third and that ninth house, and, look at them in a context together. When we're thinking about that ninth house, spiritual teachings can go in there. Journaling, undertaking a course of study or training, coming up with a personal creed or a personal set of values or a personal statement of integrity. That's all in that ninth house. In the 10th house, we've got, now this is like long-term mission and calling. So that's going to be right at that 12 o'clock spot when you lay your tarot cards down, because you're laying them down in this wheel. That 12 o'clock spot, which is, the 10th house, is like big picture. What did you come here to do? So you can juxtapose that really effectively with that 6th house. That 10th house and 6th house together tell you a lot about the person's kind of day-to-day activities and how it's either contributing to or distracting from their big picture. A really clear example of this, really couldn't be more perfect for this, where this is like 10th house is like your bigger reach in the world. I remember having a client come in and she was dutifully doing her 5th house activities of working a day job in an office, making sure that her family had money, taking care of them, doing all of that kind of duty-bound work. But what was astrologically in her 5th house, and more importantly in her 10th house, was that she was supposed to be doing something more creative and artistic for her livelihood. And she was blown away when I said to her, "Why did you give up writing?" And she was like, "How did you know that I wanted to be a writer?" And I was like, you've got a King of Cups in this 10th house. It's what you're supposed to be. You've got this, duty bound card down here in your 5th house, like a Page of Pentacles or a 10 of Pentacles, or 3 of Pentacles. I can't remember. It was like a Pentacles card down there that was really indicating that she had this duty bound nature to her, but that she really wanted to go in the direction of something more creative. So by comparing and contrasting what's in that 5th house and what's in that 10th house, you can see a lot about whether a person is actually on board with what they're meant to be doing. And if not, you can use the cards in their, in their chart or in the cards. Either way, you can use the cards to help get messages to direct them toward what they, would be more fulfilled by doing. So now in the 11th house, second to last, you have, this is where I usually put all things related to the extended family or friends who are as close as family. So this is, again, another relationship card that you can juxtapose, or relationship house that you can juxtapose with that 7th house. So whether it's the 7th, the card that's in the 7th house or planets in the 7th house, you're going to want to look at those in context with the 11th house. You're going to want to see what relationships exist there. And this is, we had like back up here in the 3rd house, more like electronics and hobbies. They've put the internet in the 11th house. I might say, I think the internet is kind of more of a 7th house thing, but I don't need to argue with it. It really, for me, is about like who you consider your tribe, in the world, whether that's your family of birth, your family of choice. And I also see a lot in the 11th house about parent-child relationships, namely what you might have learned from your parents that you're carrying forward in this life as if it was your own, but it actually isn't your own. It's something that you're mimicking or parroting because you learned it. And this is an interesting spot where often your rising sign, your ascendant, is often going to appear somewhere between this 10th and 11th house in the average chart. And so your ascendant is kind of how you come across in the world. It juxtaposes with that first house, your planet of your house of appearances. But that ascendant, that line that comes through the chart that points you in the direction of your long-term kind of evolution, that planet or that sign that's represented there can often really show you about the things that you inherited from your parents that are not yours, but that you still walk around in the world kind of wearing like a garment every day. So you can juxtapose the ascendant with the first house again to see, like, if somebody, for example, has like first house Aquarius, and then they're have a rising sign that is also that, or the rising sign that's in something. Let's see, if the first house is Aquarius, then it would go, where's Pisces? Let me just look at it really quickly. Where's Pisces? Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Capricorn. I missed one. Libra, Scorpio. So if you have a Aquarius sun and a Scorpio rising, you might find that you have a tendency, because of a parent's influence, to be more suspicious of people rather than trusting of people, even though your base tendency as an Aquarius is going to be to pretty much have like a very equality oriented and fair-minded approach to people around you. That rising in Scorpio might give it that little zzz. I was raised by somebody who came through the Depression and was always like hiding money in the mattress, that kind of thing. So it's good to kind of contrast those. And then finally, the 12th house, which is that last spot right before we come back to the 9. It's basically the 9 to 10 on the clock face. And that 12th house is what I consider what is rising from the deep. It's the subconscious, unconscious. It's what you really learn from kind of deep memories or deep lessons surfacing, deep karmas surfacing. In here, we can find people's unwitting compulsions like addiction or codependent behavior. But there's also that sense of knowing. And the 12th house contrasts really well with the 8th house in terms of, somebody might have in their 12th house something that bespeaks a certain level of, intuitive capability, but maybe they don't have any planets in their 8th house. So maybe they have a hard time trusting the magic that's arising from within them, and they don't really know where to put that magic. So then when you deal out your cards, you can see what's some guidance for that, even if there are no planets in that 8th house. So this is just like, a nice little guide. I'm going to pop it into the chat, but for those who might be watching it later, you can see this. You can go to themodernastrologer.com and look up natal chart houses, and it'll show you. Okay, so the horoscope spread. Let me pull that one up. There we go. So here's the image. Let me get a nice clear one. No, that's not a good one. I had a good one and then I put it down. Okay, here we go. All right. Let me, Pinterest. Open in new tab so that we don't have to go all the way to Pinterest. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again so that we can take a look at this together. So the horoscope spread in the tarot is basically the exact same as the houses. Now you might see at the center here, there's this 13th card, and I often put a 13th card. I usually call this spread my wheel of life spread. It doesn't track exactly the way that I do it. It doesn't track exactly to the horoscope houses, but mostly it aligns there. And over the years, I've kind of developed my own relationship to this spread. So the horoscope spread often has a 13th card, which can offer a thematic arc, especially if you're looking at the year ahead for a person. And one of the things that I love about this whole combination is that you can do so many things with this spread. You can put the person's astrological chart down and underlay that, and then look at their chart in relationship to each of the cards that you deal out. You can also start it as use it as a birthday reading, where you put the horoscope of the person here underneath it, and then you look at this as this month, the next month, the next month, the next month, and so on, as the 12 months of the year. And I usually, when I do this spread, do a little bit of both, where I'm looking at this for timing, as well as looking at it for content and characteristics. And when you use this over the top of someone's natal chart, you really see how the messages weave together. And how then looking at the clock face of your spread as also being months of the year, you get a really clear sense of timing of important things. So you can kind of mix and match these two, the tarot and the horoscope on the page together. Okay, so here under this, they would say very simple keywords: self-image, value, communication, home, creativity. I would say relationships here, romance, productivity. I would say career, partnerships of all sorts, inheritance. I'd say mystery, philosophy, big picture. Ambition, I would say longer term mission. Community, yes, I might say family. And then inner self, I agree. I call it what's emerging from the shadows into the light. And then you have your major thematic arc or your wild card here. So really the only way for us to learn how to do this is to try it. Is there anybody here who's feeling a little bit brave and has their birth data and would be willing to be the subject of a reading where we do your horoscope and then we pull the cards and look at it all? Give a little wave. Do you know when you were born and where and what time? Anybody here who's willing? All right. Okay. We have two volunteers, Lisette and Marie Peacock. I saw Lisette's hand first, so we'll start with you, Lisette. I'm going to share my screen again.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing yourself off mute. Okay. Let me go to this. Okay. This astrolabe prenatal chart is my favorite. I know there's lots of them out there, like Cafe Astrology and Astro Dance and all different ones. This is my favorite. you should look up as many as you like. So Lisette, let's get your data in here.
Okay.
And what is the birthday?
It's April 1st, 1970,
And what time?
8:28 in the morning.
And where?
Miami Beach, Florida.
Okay. So the reason I like this is because, toss us up here, we can see Lisette's chart in its circle. So here we are, first house, second house, third house, fourth house, nothing in these four. So we're going to really rely heavily on the cards there. Fifth house, chock full. We're going to have a look. Sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. Here comes her rising sign, is right here. And then, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So 11th and 12th. So she's got a whole lot going on in that 12th house. For you, Lisette, I can already tell before even getting too deeply into your reading that as I'm looking at what planets you have here, you've got your Mercury in Aries, you've got your Venus in Aries. I also have a Venus in Aries, such a difficult placement, but very fruitful in life lessons and learning about relationships. Looks like you've got, what's that little glyph? I've got to make it a little bigger so I can see here. Looks like you have your Saturn in Taurus and your Mars in Taurus. Wow. So you've got in your 12th house, your Mars in Taurus, your Saturn in Taurus. So Mars, the planet of discipline, aggression, assertiveness in Taurus, which is like I would say it probably takes you a long time to get on board with deciding you're going to take an action, and you feel like you have to really look at all the possible consequences of something before you commit. But then once you do, you're ferociously committed and you will stay it through. And then I see here with your Mercury in Aries and your Venus in Aries. I mean, one thing I know from my personal Venus in Aries is that you love so hard. You love so hard. When you love somebody, you really love them. You are all in. You are extraordinarily loyal, very protective of those you love. People better not cross people that you love. And that you are verbal, you will sometimes feel like when you're especially when you're standing up against injustice, that you didn't even know you had it in you, and then you're speaking some truth and it's just coming out, and you might not even planned it or thought of it. It just comes up and out. So I'm curious, in the 12th house, these are all the things that we kind of don't see coming. We're kind of like surprised by them. And it's showing me that earthly manifestations of expressions of devotion and love, and earthly manifestations of your fight for justice, and earthly manifestations of your assertiveness and your personal discipline, often you don't see them coming. And then all of a sudden it's like right there and it's happening. Like you might not be planning to have said something controversial, but then you do. Or you might not have been planning to have an argument with someone, and then you find yourself and you're like, how did we get in this argument? Like my mind wasn't even there. But what is coming out is still truth. So curious if that's consistent for you.
Very, extremely. Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna get some cards on this in a minute and see what's there. A couple other things I see here is that you've got some kind of a trine. I don't know that much about trines, so I'm going to leave that alone. We're going to do just more something basic, but the more deeply you study astrology, the more this whole thing is going to make sense to you when you're doing the horoscope reading. So we're going to now lay down cards. I'm going to lay down cards for Lisette's chart. Great Mother, Holy Mother, Wise and Gentle Mother, Abundant and Loving Mother, Protective and Healing Mother, I call to you. I'm here today with Lisette, and together we're seeking information and guidance about Lisette's overlaying her horoscope spread with her actual horoscope, her actual natal chart. And we are interested in gleaning messages and wisdom about both the planetary placements that she does have, as well as the houses where she doesn't have any planetary placements. And we're open to whatever messages are appropriate and important for this time and this place. We call upon all the benevolent ancestors, guardians, and guides who walk through this life with Lisette, and we ask you to be here now and guide this reading. We come to this reading together today with courage and strength, honesty and integrity, love, compassion, and gratitude for the journey of life. And may what we learn here today be of benefit to Lisette, and turning outward, may what we learn here today in some way, great or small, also be of benefit to the entire universe. For Lisette. All right, so your mystery card at the center, your card number 13 is, let's get there to this. Let me X that out. Your card number 13 at the center of your reading is the Queen of Wands, she who gets what she wants. There is a very powerful magnetism and charisma to your personality. When you laugh, you light up a room. When you are in a good space personally and you feel happy and healthy, you really radiate positive energy. You are this is another card that suggests you're very protective of the people that you love, very ready to speak your mind, even though you might sometimes feel shy. It will not stop the truth from coming to the surface. So even though you might be intimidated, or you might feel like, I'm just going to try to bring this up, it's still going to come out. So you've got that in a couple places in your reading. So now let's have a look at these charts. So your first four planets, your first four houses rather, 1, 2, 3, 4. All four of these houses have no planets in them. So we're going to start by just looking at the meanings of each house. This one being appearance and personality in the outside world. This one being money and related abundance. This one being how you learn and communicate. And this one being home and hearth. And we don't have any planets in these. So we're going to just look at the cards. So in the house of personality, 5 of Cups comes in. And this says that in your life, you've been through some significant losses. There have been things that kind of happened in your life that marked you permanently, emotionally. And even if you don't want those things to be seen by others, it still kind of comes across. This is going to mean that, for example, if you were ever bullied, that then when you encounter a bully or a new person who's kind of a bully, that they might feel automatically like they can bully you. And you feel a little like, why is this person being like this toward me? But in a way, it's almost like you wear your heart on your sleeve. And so your sensitivity, your emotions, and the things that have hurt you are kind of more readily visible to the outside world than even maybe you wish that they were. Now, that can be a really hard pill to swallow when we want to come across a certain way, but don't worry, because you've got that Queen of Wands at the center of the spread, sitting in the middle in that 13 position, and she smooths that over. So like, you clean up really nice if you want to go out and the night on the town, or if you have to make an important presentation at a meeting, you can marshal your sense of personal authority and charisma and bring that out into the world successfully. And in fact, your greatest benefit of having that 5 of Cups placement in your first house for your chart is that when it comes time for you to share personal information about your own struggles, those struggles, when you do choose to share them, immediately make you relatable and human to your audience. So your work, for example, your work as a social worker is benefited by that tender heart that you bring, and the fact that you will be able to relate to your clients. You will be able to, you don't see yourself as above them. You see yourself as also, somebody who has struggled, who has survived, who has recovered from various different difficult things. And you're able to empathically relate to them, even while you still have to maintain your boundaries as a professional service provider. But you're very relatable. And when you meet people, your tendency is to see their wounds right at the surface. And it's very easy for you to fall into wanting to help and fix them. So the Achilles heel of that availability and accessibility of your emotional connectedness is that you have to be sure that you don't kind of go down the road of trying to save people from themselves. You cannot have learned the lesson that someone else needs to learn for themselves, even if you had remarkably similar circumstances. And so it may sometimes cause frustration when you're like, I told this person that this was like something that I had been through and it was really painful and that they shouldn't do it, and they still did it. And so that frustration can sometimes creep in if you're holding as part of your satisfaction that your lessons could somehow apply to others. They can't. People have to learn their own lessons. And so that 5 of Cups says, when in doubt, when you're feeling deeply into someone else's story, look for the ways that you can nourish yourself and nurture your own triggers that are coming up, rather than trying so much to help them fix themselves. And obviously, in what you do as a career, you have some measure of professional resources available to you to help people, but you can't get too emotionally entangled. In your second house, that house of money, you've got the King of Cups, which says that, working in a helping and healing profession is really good for you. You are a naturally gifted helper healer, but you also would be very adept at writing or the arts. And if you felt a calling to make money by especially doing writing, which is what I associate with the King of Cups, the craft I associate with the King of Cups is writing, or music, you would be very good at it. Do you have a nice singing voice?
I've been told. Yeah,
I bet
I've
you
been told.
I bet you do. I bet you have a lovely singing voice, and that there's something very calming about your singing voice that, you made a little CD of lullabies, people would love it for their babies. It would be like a project.
And it's funny you say that, because writing was actually my first choice of a career before I decided on therapy. So
Yeah, becoming a helper healer was right up there with becoming a writer. There's no reason you can't do both. And if you chose to write something and put it out to market to get it published, you would probably be successful at it.
Okay.
Even though you don't have any planets in that house, the King of Cups is really strong in that space.
Okay.
Now, interestingly, in your third house, so that's the house of relational communication and learning, you have a Queen of Cups. So it's not always this way that the King and Queen of Cups show up right next to each other in a reading. So I'm really paying attention to this because it's saying to me here that there's the potential, even though there's no planets here, there's the potential with this King and Queen of Cups that you met the person that you're with romantically somehow through your work, either not necessarily as a client, but like as another provider, or is also a helper, healer, spirit in the world in some way.
Yep, he is.
Mm-hmm.
He
So
is.
in that relationship dynamic, the two of you nurture each other because you are both nurturers in the world. So there is like a really good equal level of nurturing that happens between the two of you in your relationship. And we'll see more of this when we get over here to the fifth house and we're looking at these planets here in your fifth house. But for your third house, you know, King and Queen of Cups right next to each other says, you know, in the career and how we learn and grow areas, that through your romantic relationship, you learn a lot, you grow a lot. It is a locus of growth for you. And that it's likely that you would meet someone who's in a similar helper healer role in the world to your own. Finally, in the fourth house, house of home and hearth, we have the world, and we also have the tail of the dragon. So here's your head of your dragon is up here. You know, you've got your, oh, that it was Sagittarius. That was the one that I missed. But here's your Aquarius right here. You're rising in Aquarius, which means that the tail of your dragon is in Leo. This line that kind of comes through and it demarcates the difference between the third and the fourth house. In Lisette's chart, it would be somewhere else in someone else's chart, but it often will demarcate the line between two houses, is your ascendant and your past life. So what this says is that in a past life, you were a Leo. In the past life, you had a very natural ability to have charisma, to have like, you know, attention, public attention, people wanting to be near you, people enjoying your leadership. You were naturally a leader. In this life, you actually, with your rising in Aquarius and where you're headed beyond this life, is that you have, and this is, here we go.
I always thought my rising was
Your
in
rising is
Taurus.
Taurus. I'm sorry. Your head of your dragon, I'm sorry, is in Aquarius. Your head of your dragon is in Aquarius. Your rising is in Taurus. But sorry, my mistake with the terminology. But the head of your dragon is where you're going in your future lives. So this is like your past lives in Leo, your future lives in Aquarius, and your rising is here in Taurus. But this line demarcating this is saying that where you're headed in this life and beyond in your growth pattern is actually to learn to uplift the underdog and to bring together the family of humanity under the aegis of a cause or a belief system, not necessarily in the nitty gritty every day, we're all going to live in a hippie commune together, but more like we're all of us looking at the same light, seeing with common purpose, and we're bringing along anybody who feels neglected or left out. So all the charisma and attention that you were able to gather in the past life now ends up being in service to uplifting the voices of those who might not have that same level of charisma in this life and beyond. And this is a very altruistic sign, Aquarius. It's a very soft-hearted sign, even as it's a little bit of a remote sign. And sometimes Aquarians feel a little distant, but it's not because they don't care. It's actually because they care too much. So that Aquarius head of your dragon is like, you know, you're moving into that humanitarian mission. And so whereas you provide that direct service through being a therapist now, or, you know, in your career, in the future, it could be that you decide through your writing or something else that you want to create some kind of a movement, or maybe that you want to create some kind of a nonprofit, or you want to create some kind of an organization or a community of people serving in common purpose for the greater good. So thinking about like, how could you write something, you know, think about like, how might you write a book that's directed at visionary, altruistic, humanitarian people who want the greater good for all? And what do you need to say to those people to get everybody looking at the same light together? And then
That's amazing. That's really incredible because I'm in the process of learning how to try to start a nonprofit. So
oh, yeah, perfect. Good.
that's incredible.
Yeah, after, you know, how, if you don't mind me asking, you're 1970, so you're
Yeah.
51.
51. Yeah. Hmm.
So I'd say after 52, you'll be ready to do that.
Wow.
Because in the Mayan calendar, you're reborn at the age of 52. You take on a whole new mission. And so, and I've seen, you know, in Western astrology, there may be other things associated with the age of 52, but in the Mayan calendar, especially, is when we graduate from our birth Nahual into the Nahual of who we're to die as, actually. So we're like
Wow.
two people in this one lifetime. So in this lifetime, for example, I'm just going to pull this up so I can get this for you so that we can kind of add in the Tzolk'in. Okay, so your birthday is April 1st. Let's just find out really quickly. 1970, April 1st, 1970. So you were born on 12 Sikin. You're born at a very high degree of the sign of eagle. The eagle is the visionary kind of energy, and you've always dreamed of what a better world would be like. It's why you became a therapist instead of a writer, because in the end you really felt like you needed to help the world get there one person at a time. But you have this big vision. 12 is a very visionary number in the Tzolk'in, and you're in Sikin, the eagle is like, you know, let's see where your Mayan cross takes you in the future. Here we go. So April, I have to type, I have to use a couple different resources to calculate this all because they're in different programs. 1970. 970. Okay, 10 and go. So hang on, I have to recalculate it. Jumped on me. It'll just be one quick second. 19. Okay, so you are, you know, the eagle, born on the, you know, the 12th day of the 13-day week in the Mayan calendar, and you're going to become the dawn. You're Nahual for the dawn, for dawn, and kind of breaking dawn, shedding light. I think it's probably the awakening is where you go after the age of 52. So it's like you spend this first 52 years of your life dreaming about that better world. And then by the time you turn 52, you're ready to like start to break that out and manifest it. It will rise. So I love that you're thinking about putting together a nonprofit at this time. Is the nonprofit some kind of a foundation or educational nonprofit for the greater good?
Yeah, what I would like to do is do a nonprofit that helps people with mental illness, or that has, you know, issues that they can't afford therapy, and they can't afford a coach, and they can't afford like natural, like alternative therapies that can help them, and that I can find a way to get them that help. So
Yeah,
like if you want to get like EMDR, you know, therapy, which is extremely expensive, for example, or you want to do biofeedback, or
right.
anything like that, that I would be able to somehow, you know,
Provide.
provide that.
Like
Yeah.
you
So
basically create like almost in a way, it's like a treatment fund
right,
that people could come
right.
apply and say like, I'd like to do 10 sessions of EMDR, or I'd like to do, 10 sessions of, or I'd like to go and try psilocybin, or, whatever, any number of other therapies that are currently kind of
Exactly.
considered experimental. That would be great. And writing about why that sort of thing is important from your perspective as an existing licensed therapist who has done a lot of case management would be, where you write about cases in which these things have helped people, these things could have helped people, but we couldn't get there. These things, were beneficial in some way. That would make a very convincing um, article or book that you could put out into the world that would serve to help you get support and funding for this mission. So your first four, interestingly, when we look at your horoscope chart here, your first four houses have no planets in them. And those four houses are actually really about the self. And what this says is that you are at your most comfortable when you are in selfless service. And so for you, you have to be very careful to watch out for your self-care, because you will neglect yourself in favor of others.
I do all the time.
Mhm.
That's that's why I have so many health issues, because
Mhm.
that's my biggest problem. Yeah.
And the world here says in hearth and home, you basically treat your house as if, or you at least in the past have treated your house as like, this is like my command central. I sleep here, I eat here, but my life happens out there. And since the pandemic, you have had to really readjust how you relate to your home. And you've had to really put in the effort to think about your home as a space that nurtures you, and that growing up you did not necessarily feel that home was a nurturing space, and that you haven't often felt that home was like your safe space. You feel actually safer when you're out there being useful.
Yeah. So true.
Mhm. So your reading is showing, in these first four cards, that even though these planetary influences are not here, in the first four cards, we can see where a little bit of what lies under the surface comes to the fore for you. And when I just calculated it with your Mayan calendar, that really also added another dimension, being that you're 51, about to, come, you'll be 52 in 2022, and that after that you really do need to think about like how you're going to bring more of that mission out into the world and share that mission with others, where you are not necessarily the one doing all of the healing work, but where you become that kind of hopeful space where people come and then you pass them on to the healers, and you're not the one doing it like one person at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's look at this. This is where things get a little bit juicier. We're down here in the fifth house, and it's the fifth house is straddling Virgo and Libra. So your planet of, looks like Pluto, is here in Virgo, and your planet Uranus is in Libra. So Pluto is kind of like the planet also of like, you know, similar. It's interesting, like Pluto is very much resonant with sex, death, the occult, similar themes that we would normally see in the 8th house of the chart. But for you, it's in the 5th house of the chart, which means that, you know, in a bigger sense, your Pluto is going to be, your relationships are going to often, like past relationships you've had and romantic relationships you've had, are often going to bring to the surface deep things, like deep traumas, where you are catalyzing that for your partner or they are catalyzing that for you. And it's good that you ultimately ended up with a helper healer spirit in your life, because the Uranus vibe, which is a very, you know, kind of mystical, rational, reasonable, scientific, but also like alchemical energy, is that when you have the right partner, like your current partner, the transformation that happens of those traumas into strength is really complete. So the two of you have worked through, I would say the two of you have probably worked through a lot. When you met, you probably both brought up some pretty serious shadow work in each other, and where you both kind of had to look at what you were doing and be like, I don't want this to be like every other relationship I've ever had. I want this to be different. I want this to be a healed, whole, happy relationship. And I want you know, the two of us to have a sense of having overcome our problems of the past. And then you both, looks like, made a plan for how to do that, and you've done it. You know, you do not trigger each other as much now, maybe as you did in the beginning of the relationship. And it seems like it's a relationship that's very nurturing and that inspires you both to be better, to think better, to be bigger, to be, you know, more, to be more healed.
Very true. Very true.
And it seems like you two are probably capable of having extremely honest, detailed conversations about things that other people would find very hard to talk about.
We do all the time.
Mhm. You're not, you don't waste time on trying to cover things up with politeness in the relationship. You're really ready to get right down to business and to figure it out. And the two of you together with this balance of this, you know, with your Virgo, you know, your Pluto in Virgo is going to be very focused on using the tools of healing and like the mechanisms of healing to overcome problems. And I would say that together with your lover, the two of you are actually quite magical. And I would not be surprised if your lover also is a very spiritual person in his own way.
Yep. He's a practicing druid since he was 16 years old.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes total sense for this. And where, like, when there's a problem to be tackled, you're both able to be like calm and go deep.
Yep, absolutely.
Very good. That's a, you know, that's a gift. That's a real gift, especially when relationships are often very triggering. So now in your 6th, so your card in the 5th house, by the way, is the Temperance card. So you and your lover are a good balanced match for each other. And where, when it's too much for you, he picks up a little more. When it's too much for him, you pick up a little bit more, and neither of you is afraid of doing the hard work. In your 6th house, so here, your 6th house straddles Libra and Scorpio, and it looks like you've got your Jupiter in Scorpio in the 6th house. So that 6th house is, you know, our space of like aspirations. It's what I mentioned for short-term career, you know, kind of what you do in your day-to-day life. And your day-to-day life, Jupiter is literally about, and with Scorpio there is like literally about dredging the bottom of the river of life and pulling up both the bodies that are down there as well as the treasures that are down there. And so I would say you have a particular capacity in your day-to-day life to be a finder of lost souls, and also to be able to pull the very best out of challenging situations. So when, for example, in your day-to-day life as a therapist, you are working with people, you can see the things that they're trying to hide. It's just like right there for you, very visible to you. And you can find ways through using your tools, because you do have that Pluto in Virgo, through using your tools, you can find the ways to elucidate them, that truth from them, so that they will eventually see what you see. But you don't just come right out and tell them, because that Scorpio is a secretive sign. And that Jupiter says, even when you see the whole big picture and you're like, yep, okay, I could literally, like, just from meeting you, talking to you for an hour, I could probably write a decent biography of you and all your traumas, your wounds, your strengths, your weaknesses, your coping mechanisms, and your defense mechanisms. Even though you see that whole big picture, right there, it's really hard for you to, you wouldn't ever just come right out and sort of lay it all out like that.
Yeah.
Instead, you keep that very much to yourself. It might be in your case notes, and then you'll cycle back through what you've seen again and again, so that you can pull forward and tease out those little pieces of truth, so that that person is ultimately dredging the bottom of their own river to get both the bodies and the treasure. And when the body surfaces, you can be in that non-judgmental scorpionic state of like, hey man, we all have ghosts and we all have demons and we all have skeletons in our closets. And at the same time, when it's treasure that surfaces, you can also be in that space of like, I always knew you had it in you. And I see this strength in you and I believe in you. So that's like your Jupiter and Scorpio energy. And what comes up there is the Page of Pentacles. So it's saying that you are in right livelihood. I do think that when you were standing on that threshold of choosing, do I want to become a therapist or do I want to become a writer? You made the right choice in terms of what was going to pay your day-to-day bills and what was going to be a good day-to-day activity for you. But I do think that especially because you don't have any planets in that financial house, even with that King of Cups there, you don't have any planets there supporting it. So the planets do support your career as a therapist. The planets do support your career as a dredger of the river, the bottom of the rivers of life. But don't forget that you can bring in your writing, especially as a way of reflecting on the lessons you've gleaned from helping however many people dredge their rivers of life. And you can then bring forth truth and wisdom in the world in a published format. And it may not be able to be the thing that would support you for the rest of your life, but it's not actually so much about making money in that case for yourself as it is about supporting your foundation. Yeah. So when you write your book, have the proceeds from the sales of your book go to start your foundation. Keep being a therapist in your day job, or a helper healer spirit, in your day job. And that would also include doing things like readings for people. That could be your night job, and then your weekend job is altruistically helping humanity through this, project that you want to launch. So as long as you make your beneficiary of the writing that vision, it will generate money for it. It will generate income for it. It'll happen.
Thank you.
Okay. So now in your 7th house. So 7th house is the house of, you know, general relationships. It's the house of like partnerships. It can be marriage, but it can also be just how we interact with others. And you have a pretty strong, looks like it's a Neptune in Sagittarius here. Sagittarian energy is very like inquisitive, loves to learn, loves to grow, sometimes is like can have like an energy of like, I really, you know, I'm like a walking library of things. So I know in your life you studied a lot of different paths and different, you know, practices and different therapies and stuff like that. So that, you know, wide ranging Sagittarian energy is there. But Neptune, which is the planet of like dreams and the spaces in between the worlds and, you know, dimensional communication and imagination, creativity, that Neptune in Sagittarius says it's probably been hard for you to pin yourself down to one thing. You've probably studied lots of different things and identified with lots of different things. It's been very difficult for you to find like one definition of yourself.
Very true. Very true. My friends call me a jack of all trades and master of nothing because I love so many different things at the same time. And I dabble in so many things.
And there's nothing wrong with it. You know, actually, it's going to serve you really well when you develop your Sybil sessions, which are those like long, you know, kind of wide ranging sessions that bring together a bunch of different modalities that you're studying in the program with me, because you can bring together more than one thing. You don't just have to be a tarot reader or a, you know, dowser or a, you know, astrologer or whatever. You can take all the different things that you study and bring them together in combination, and that in such a way that they will serve to help reveal to the querent all of the bigger dimension of what's possible for them and help them dream bigger for themselves. So it's That's actually, awesome. You know, a great gift. And I think that part of your idea of your foundation, where it's like, if I can help you get healing, then I know that you will turn around and maybe become a healer. And this is what I want to say to you is think about when you do your nonprofit, not only creating the sort of scholarship or funding program to help people access therapies. Think about also creating a separate track of funding so that people could go through those therapies and then once they healed themselves, go on to learn to become practitioners. So
that's a great idea.
You know, create like a path for somebody to go from needing healing to then becoming the healer. That would be an ideal trajectory for your nonprofit.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great idea.
In empowering people. And again, it's not sort of self-serving. It's not you as the main healer. You're farming people out to all the many different healers and schools of healing. And in that way, your Sagittarius is, you know, Neptune is satisfied because you kind of get to keep dabbling in everything, like learning a little bit and having connections with all different kinds of people. Okay, so now that's your 7th house. So that's like your relational house. So now your 8th and 9th houses, the house of the occult and sex and death, and your 9th house, the house of kind of what's your overall purpose, don't have any planets in them, which is probably why you've always known you're supposed to be a healer, but it's probably been hard for you, especially with this Sagittarius influence over here, hard for you to pin yourself down to just like one thing, and that none of them, like they all feel like a calling and nothing feels like the calling. And it's, you know, that can become frustrating if you're waiting for the calling. And I think what I'm supposed to tell you today, because your card there in that spot is the 4 of Cups, which is like, like, What's going on? Like, why can't I? And it's, why can't I figure this out? And the Four of Cups also warns against allowing other people to put their definitions on you. So through your life, you might meet someone who's really charismatic, who's a really good, instructor, and they might want to conscript you into do my thing, like take my 5-point program, and then you can become a practitioner of that 5-point program. And you might be like, I'm really glad I learned those 5 points, but I don't know if I'm supposed to belong to this exactly. I'm kind of supposed to still be a free agent. Just so you know, that disappointment in feeling like you're not really sure where you belong can be alleviated once you realize that you are meant to be that Queen of Wands at the center of your reading, a hub of all different kinds of things, and that you don't have to limit yourself to just one. And that actually goes along with your Dawn card, your Akaba card, your Dawn definition in your Mayan cross, because you are a person who stands in liminal spaces comfortably. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You're very both and you like to create situations where everybody gets something of what they want. And sometimes doing that is its own satisfaction. And it's not about you then feeling like, okay, I get to nestle in where I belong. Where you belong is in service, and your greatest sense of belonging will be when you see other people accessing belonging because of your work. With no cards in this category of sexuality, death, and mysteries, but with that Capricorn nature, there's definitely sensual energy, even if you don't have any planets in there. You're a sensualist. You really appreciate physical touch is one of your love languages. You're very appreciative when your partner makes you feel safe. You're very much aware of the preciousness of human connection and contact. And even though you don't have any planets there, your 8 of Pentacles says that through your life, you've learned a lot about sexuality, your own and others, by trying things. You try it and you see, do I like this? Do I like that? Do I want this? Do I want that? And that as you feel safer and safer with somebody, more dimensions of your sexuality come forward to be explored. And so don't worry so much if you don't have planets in that area. It means that, your chart isn't really being particularly triggered in that area anywhere. But down here in relationships with that Pluto in Virgo, you've kind of got that handled. Like that Plutonian energy in your 5th house balances no planet in your 8th house. Okay, so now your 10th house is where you've got your moon, and your moon is in Aquarius. And the moon in Aquarius is an interesting placement because it means that on an emotional level, you are very fair-minded, you're very balanced, you don't get like obsessive about people. You're actually fairly detached. You don't really feel like you need a lot of outside validation for your emotional states. And in fact, it might make you uncomfortable if other people were focusing a lot on your emotional state. You're more comfortable deflecting that and being like, I'll deal with my own emotions. Thank you very much. But how about you? How are you doing? And so you have a tendency to deflect emotionally off of attention, off of yourself and onto other people, even when they are trying to be there for you emotionally. Sometimes you're like, I'm cool, it's good, it's all fine, because you're private about your personal stuff. The card that's showing up, and this is the 10th house, is your house of your purpose, your long-term career, your sense of mission on earth. And so, creating emotional safety for others, regardless of whether you yourself participate in the in receiving what you've created is really important to you. You know, in every area in your horoscope, in your natal chart here, it shows that you place altruism above personal comfort in just like almost every way, in profession, in personal relationships, in family, with friends, with clients. You are often putting others before yourself. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's actually a brilliant and beautiful, you know, enlightened way of being. But it means that your emotional self-care is extremely important in order for you to accomplish your mission. If your emotional self-care starts to falter, you will not be able to be that giving presence that you want to be for others. And it almost feels like then things just constrict. And I know that when you recently went through these health difficulties that you've been suffering, you really had to bring it all home to self-care, so that self-care became a part of your job, a part of you being able to do your job in the world, and a part of you being able to fulfill your longer term mission. So just be clear that going forward now, you have to care for yourself. Caring for yourself is the way that you care for others. It allows you to continue to care for others profoundly. And your card there is the King of Swords. And the King of Swords says, and it's a reversed King of Swords. So your reverse King of Swords here says, you've got to really watch out for a tendency to rationalize why you haven't performed self-care. So like, you know, oh, I was helping someone else and so I ran out of time, or, oh, it was just so busy at work and so I didn't have time, or, you know, oh, I was so worried about things, you know, going on with this other person that it made me realize like, oh, I don't even need to worry about my own stuff is small comparatively. Watch out for that.
That's me. That's me every day.
That's your danger,
That's my,
and that's your danger zone. You're
yeah.
here on this planet to learn, to study the emotional intelligence techniques personally within yourself that will allow you to care for yourself as the vessel through which goodness pours into the world. So just the same way as if you had a movie projector and you had a bunch of people who you really wanted to show them the movie, you got to take care of that projector. Because if you don't have the projector, they can't see it on the screen. They're all sitting there with their popcorn waiting for nothing. So you've got to take care of the projector so that everyone can watch the movie. Keep that as your kind of as like a little mnemonic device whenever you start to get self-sabotaging and self-sacrificing in an overgiving way. That's like, wait a minute, in order for everybody to see the movie, I've got to take care of the projector. That'll help you depersonalize and feel a little less awkward about self-care. Okay, so 2 more cards here and 2 more houses. Your 11th house has in it your sun. So your sun is in Aries in the 11th house. And it also has in it, what's that one? The Omega symbol, your North Node. So your North Node here in your 11th house is in Pisces. So the sun and the North Node, both in the 11th house, tell me that relationships are everything to you. Relationships mean more to you than, you know, physical items or status or fame or hobbies. Relationships are very important, and that relationships that are family or like family are very important. And with that sun in Aries in the 11th house, people are going to think of you as motherly, regardless of whether you want them to or not. You could be like, no, I'm not your maternal figure out here. They are still going to think of you as motherly. That's just You bring a familia energy to everything you do. People will think of you as being in their family, regardless of whether you want to be there or not. The other thing is, and they will treat you as an authority figure because of that. You're not just in the family, you're an authority figure. So it's, you get kind of assigned a high value status in people's lives very quickly, maybe more quickly than you would feel comfortable with personally, but by virtue of your profession, obviously, the point of a therapist is that you're going to get under the hood and get pretty personal pretty quickly. So, you have a gift of that, but you do have to watch out to make sure that your clients don't end up seeing you as a mother figure and then rebelling against you, because that Aries can bring out a little rebellious energy. Sometimes people really react strongly if you're just trying to tell them, hey, listen, you got to like clean up your act, or you've got to be honest with yourself, or, you may have disappointed yourself in that instance. And what are you going to do to correct it? They might react strongly. And so, going back to that Neptunian gift with your Sagittarius over here, or not with your Sagittarius, that Neptunian gift with your Libra over here, you're going to want to, be cautious that there's like always a solutions oriented approach, so that people don't walk away feeling like they've disappointed you. So, and I'm sure in your career, you've had people who are like, I didn't want to come tell you that I fell off the wagon because I thought you'd judge me, or I didn't want to,
I get that all the time. I just went through that conversation on Friday with a client who was lying to me that she stopped drinking when she didn't, because she was scared that I would be disappointed. And I told her, I'm your therapist. I'm not your mom. I don't get disappointed. Here to help you.
I'm not
So,
here
yeah.
to judge you. I'm here to help you. And I'm glad you finally told me so we can actually work on it, right? Because you're super solutions oriented. So as long as you always keep that tone of like, anyone could come tell you anything and you won't judge them, but you'll help them find the solution, with at the same time that Aries boundary of like, and don't lie to me again, because it's counterproductive to our work together. Like, I don't judge you for drinking, and I don't judge you. You have an addiction, and it's a complicated thing to work through. And I've got all kinds of tools and resources. The one thing you cannot do is lie to me, because that's counterproductive to our work. So it's like that, finding that way to hold both the boundaries of Aries and the fire of that, with all that helpful solutions oriented and deflecting the mommy projections. That's going to be important for you. And then with your North Node up here, your North Node with the Pisces, you're deeply, deeply sensitive. And you've got a real, emotional, like, I would say that your emotions are more important to you in terms of how you function in your day-to-day life than your physical comfort or your mental rationalized, kind of rational mind. Like, you can know that everything's okay. You can put pain or difficulty aside and plow through. But if you emotionally do not feel safe, everything starts to fall apart. So your emotional safety and your sense of emotional security are key. And that Aries sun helps protect you a lot. You've got the watery Pisces and the fiery Aries right here in the same house. So it's like you've had to create your own safety in this life, and it is very important to you. And as long as you carve out the space to defend it, you're good. All right. And last but not least, what's emerging from the shadows into the light, the unknown. Oh, and by the way, your card for the house, the 9th house, was the 9 of Wands, which is like always feeling like you're almost there, but not quite. Like, almost always feeling like, oh, I'm almost there, but I have a little more to do. And just so you know, that's like one way that your Aries nature will kind of keep you always learning. You kind of are like the, you know, the ram, but somebody's put like some food on a stick and they're sitting on the back and they're holding it out there, and the ram is always following, you know, always trying to get to that food, and so keeps going. So but you are the ram, and you are the rider, and you are also the snack that's hanging out there on the pole. You are all three parts of that. So just remember that that sense of like almost but not quite, that little sense of dissatisfaction, that's your growth edge. When you look at something you've done and you think, well, that was okay, but I think it could have been better. Probably nobody else thinks that, but that's where you grow. That's where you inspire yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. You've got to be like the right. I have a client that I work with who, she's got a strong Aries sun, similar position. And we've talked about how her inner GI Jane really needs to like be a kind and disciplined energy, as opposed to on your knees, private, you know, drop and give me 20. Like, don't do that to yourself. Instead, do the like, well, it was pretty good. I can see how it could be better, and I'll do better next time, now that I know. Let your, you know, inner drill sergeant rest from time to time. Okay, last house, 12th house, where we started, that juicy house, 4 major placements spanning fire and earth. You know, that Mars in Taurus, girl, when you are, you could hold a grudge forever. Like if you get mad and you're done, you're done. They might as well go to the other side of the moon. You know, similarly with your, what did I say it was? This one, this little, oh, your Saturn. Yeah. Also, I'm just going to say this really sort of directly. Be careful about wishing others might suffer in order to learn their lessons. It's not conscious. That's not something you consciously do. Consciously, mentally, you would never dream of like delighting or gloating over someone's suffering because they are learning their lesson. But underneath, in the subconscious or unconscious space, there's a little schadenfreude when you see like somebody's had to learn their lesson the hard way. There's a little part of you that's like, told you so, could have told you that. So just, you know, be careful of that, you know, it's under there. And so, you know, there's nothing wrong with wanting people to genuinely learn. Just be aware that sometimes the underneath motivation is that there will be that part of you that's not the higher part of you that's like, well, I guess you're just going to have to go and suffer. You know, it's one thing to be like, you know, we all have to, all of us have our lessons that we have to learn the hard way, and I'm not responsible for anyone else's. And then the other side of that, which is, well, you just got to leave them where Jesus flying them, you know, and just be cautious. And I only say that as a Taurus who knows that feeling.
Yeah.
That little
the holding the grudge, that's something I work on every day, but it's really hard. Like I can forgive, but if you really hurt me, I can't, sometimes I just can't move past it. It's like, it just stays like permanently embedded in my brain.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
really hard. That's
you know,
really hard.
I actually think that going on, looking back at your sun in Aries, that actually that means that you've got healthy boundaries, that you can forgive someone, but you're not going to give them another chance to hurt you, you know? So again, it's really a matter of like how you hold it with gentleness. Like I will forgive, I'll work it out with you, but that doesn't mean I'm letting you back into my life. I still am allowed to hold my boundaries, and that's okay. And yes, life will now be the thing that teaches you this lesson. And I'm not going to be there watching because I know that I might delight in it a little bit. And that's not who I want to be. It's good to turn away from that so that you don't have to see it happening. You know, it's actually lightens up your life considerably. And then with your Venus in Aries, as well as your Mercury in Aries, in that 12th house, you would be a remarkably gifted channel, insofar as that Mercury in Aries in the 12th house means short, direct, authoritative statements would be easily surfaced from within the depths of your unconscious. So next month, or in October, when we're studying enthusiasm or possession by the deities, the goddesses, that's a really good time for you to practice channeling and letting messages just come through, and not worrying about them having to be flowery or stated like in an elegant way. It might be short, it might be direct, it might be very like authoritative, like you must do this thing. And if in readings you find that as you're in the middle of the reading and you're like, I don't know why I'm supposed to tell you this, but you need to like go get 3 ears of corn and you need to tie them together with some red and blue string, and you need to take them and leave them as an offering in this place. Trust it. Trust it. When things surface from the deep like that, and you're like, I literally have no idea why I'm telling you this. It's not in these cards. It's not in anything I've looked at. I'm just supposed to tell you really strongly this thing. Go with it. You never know. You might say to somebody like, I don't know why I'm supposed to tell you this, but you're supposed to go and like cook a pot of beans and take them and put them at a crossroads where there's a train tracks, because there's people gossiping about you, and the person might be like, oh, well, I'm, in Santeria, I'm a child of Ogun, and that is one of the things that we do to stop gossip. So,
Wow.
you just don't
Okay.
know. And should you continue further down your path with the Orisha, as I know you've been studying them, you would be excellent. You'd be very gifted at transpossession,
Wow.
like letting them come into you.
Okay.
And that's a very, deep kind of 12th house Mercury situation. And then the Venus in Aries in the 12th house says that, in a way, love really only showed up in a really deep way when you weren't looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
It
True.
was like you were not out there hunting for a partnership. And that's when you met the love of your life, and you love ferociously hard. If somebody is, got you as a friend, you're very loyal, you're very devoted, and you're very protective, and you will sometimes have to watch for wanting to protect people from themselves. So you'd be cautious about that. Like you can't stop someone, from having to learn their lessons any more than you can make someone learn their lesson.
Okay.
Okay. And then your card in your 12th house here is the 3 of Pentacles, which says that in this lifetime, you'll have a lot of different ways in which unexpectedly you make money, or you achieve a goal or an accomplishment that you didn't even know you were going to have. That like, if you were to look down the line of your life, there's a lot of things that have come up for you financially, in terms of opportunities, and for love opportunities, where it was like, you did not see that coming. It almost is like you were surprised by it, but a part of you knew it was coming. It's just a deep part.
It's funny you say that, because that's been happening to me. 21 years ago, I learned to become an Akashic reader. Became a certified Akashic reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought of using that to make a dime. And lately, some friends of mine started telling people, do you know she knows how to do readings? And before you know it, I had a ton of people contacting me for readings
Mm-hmm.
at a moment when I was so financially strapped and I was having so many problems at work. And I did not even imagine that coming. I had not put myself out there. I had not gone around telling people or making advertisements of any kind. And yet, word of mouth, and I ended up getting a ton of readings.
Yeah, and it just
So that
worked.
was, yeah,
And then your gift was right there and ready to go, even though you were like, that was 20 years ago. I wasn't even thinking about that.
yeah,
But it
exactly.
comes up.
Yep.
Well, I hope so. We're just at the end of our time. We're a little over time today, but I was really glad we got through your whole chart. I hope that you guys can see from what I shared today and how I did this, because this is how I teach, is to show you by laying the cards on top of the houses and then looking at the houses in context with each other and looking at the planets in the houses and what they mean, you can see so much about a person's path, about their strengths, their flaws, their journey. You can see so much when you look into the cards about the timing of things. And so even if maybe you have felt intimidated by like trying to learn how to be an astrologer, which I feel super intimidated by trying to learn to be an astrologer. But I know enough that I can do this, where I can look at the houses, I can look at their planets, and I can look at my cards, and together it makes sense. That is where you can make a really great combination of working with the sortilege method of tarot and the calculation method of astrology and making them work for you as a reader. I hope that,
Actually,
yes,
question. I'm sorry. House 11. What was the card again for House 11?
9 of Wands.
Oh, isn't that for the ninth house?
No, the ninth house was the 4 of Cups.
Oh, Four of Cups. Okay.
And the
Okay.
10th house was the King of Swords. 11th reversed. 11th house is 9 of Wands. 12th house is 3 of Pentacles.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So everybody, I am going to bring us to a close because you've already stayed longer than I normally have us here, but I hope this was helpful. My advice is go to Astrolabe free natal chart or Cafe Astrology or wherever you do yours, calculate your chart, do a spread, put them together, and you can always send me questions if you are like, where did this match? How does this go? We can see what happens. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Yeshi. This was amazing.
Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Lisette,
Thank
for
you.
being willing to be our guinea pig today. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.